Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious. Look at what I got behind me here. I've got Southwest New Mexico or Arizona. Not. That is the surface of Mars that we're going to be talking about a little bit today, because 2 years ago, tomorrow, February 18th, 2021, is when Perseverance, the SUV-sized rover and the second one to land on Mars, uh, successfully landed, and it's been doing 2 years of science, and this is part of it. These striated sediment layers that this rover is actually driving on Mars in a lake. It would be underwater 3 billion years ago when we suspected water was in this terrain here. So we're going to talk about that. We got some cool space history for you from 1959 to 1965 to up till today there. So, and a couple little friends to show you along the way on today's Stay Curious program. So thank you, Marty Winkle, for running the program today. We had it set up by Connie, one of our ace volunteers there. Connie McDaniel, thank you for all you do for our museum. These are two of our stellar volunteers here, Marty Winkle and Karan and Connie McDaniel. So if you're in the area or even a snowbird and feel like you'd like to volunteer once in a while at the American Space Museum, we'd love to have you part of our family. Well, and speaking of our family, how we keep the doors open is our space charity memorabilia auctions. And Saturday we're having our 25th one, all told, at noon here in the building in downtown Titusville. Or you can join us at americanspacemuseum.org. Log in at the auction tab at the top. It'll direct you to where you need to go. It'll take you to Bid Again Auctions, where Chuck Jeffrey, who's been an instrumental member of keeping this museum afloat with his auctions and his space knowledge. Chuck Jeffrey will be conducting the auction for Bid Again Auctions, his business. 400 items are up there for sale. Here's just a look at a couple items there. You could actually have a piece of the Apollo 13 Odyssey spacecraft that is sitting in the Cosmosphere in Kansas, or a piece of Aquarius that, of course, was abandoned, burned up in Earth's atmosphere, I believe, after it was the lifeboat. And other items like that. 400 items to choose from. Things will go from $100 to several $1,000s, as these Apollo items should. They're signed by the crew. You can bid today, right up to 12 o'clock. You can put, well, I'm going to bid $2,000 on that Aquarius piece there. And if the bidding only goes up to $1,600 like it is there, and you're that bidder, you get it for $1,600. It doesn't go up to $2,000. So a lot of fun, a lot of space history and knowledge you can get by following the auction. It'll start at noon. It won't be over till 6 o'clock or so. Come join us, or join us on in cyberspace there, as I will be doing, to watch the auction. Click off there. Thank you, Chuck Jeffrey, for all you do for our museum. Well, today, several of us went out to the Space Museum, and we got some autographs from this wonderful astronaut, Charlie Walker. He was a 3-time astronaut, the first commercial astronaut, as he was paid by, he never drew a NASA paycheck, he said, Marty. When he was out there, he was a worker on the satellites that were deployed out there. And here's a picture of Marty. Boy, old Mark Smith sternly looking at you there, counting. All right, that's number 4, Marty. You're out of here, okay? They keep track. You're allowed to have 4 signatures a day, all right? And there's some joke of whether there's 4 items or 3 signatures a day. Okay, they're correcting me here. I thought it was 4 for a while. Yeah. Cut back. All right. Well, anyway, there you see a big long line there at the gift shop there, Kennedy Visitors Complex. And we always have a big time going out there. Not just seeing the astronauts, we want to support them as the American Space Museum. And Marty's been out there quite a few times, and it's great to hear people talking about Stay Curious in the Space Museum, and not always knowing that you're involved with it. So hope you get out there. It's worth the $70 or $80, $85 to get in there just to see Atlantis and the Saturn V rocket and touch a moon rock. So we're very grateful. And that reminds me that Monday we're going to have Nick Thomas, the #1 astronaut wrangler out there. We're going to talk on February 20th about the 1962 launch of John Glenn into space. And we're looking forward to having Nick Thomas on Stay Curious with some great stories he has about America's #1 hero. I don't care, of astronauts, got to be John Glenn. Well, we get a lot of people visiting our museum now. We love that. They come into our museum. Sometimes they can sit in our Stay Curious studio and shoot the breeze with me a little bit there. And this gentleman, Dave Kalaji, you're going to see his face here in a minute. Dave has this jacket that he wears. He's a big collector and vendor. Apollo 11 TV recovery team. Yes, this man was on the Hornet, the recovery ship that picked up Apollo 11 out of the Pacific Ocean near Hawaii, and then Apollo 12. And there's Dave. We love you, Dave. He's a good guy. USS Hornet. He was, of course, a Marine on that ship. Not a very big ship, by the way. There's Apollo 12. Beautiful patches he has, Marty. You got something to say?
Yeah, the Hornet is called an LPH, Landing Platform Helicopters. It's a World War II aircraft carrier, but now they've designated Landing Platform Helicopter.
Okay. And that, of course, that's what it brought in. Apollo 12 there. And there's another picture of Dave. Boy, you're not going to see this patch anywhere. +3. Okay. Now, the Hornet +3 was a button and so forth out there. I have never seen this with a Hornet patch there. And hope Chuck Jeffrey's watching there, our auction specialist. He's probably drooling, or any of you collectors out there over. Thank you for coming in, Dave. Look at those 3 gorgeous patches there. Yes, boy, that's a rare one there. TV recovery team, Marty. Wow, that's really something there. So we'll get Dave on the show one time, but from time to time we love featuring collectible things out there. Well, on February 17th, 1959, off of Launch Complex 18A at Cape Canaveral Air Force Base, Vanguard 2 was launched. This was a very primitive and very early rocket launch there. I'll bet there's cruise missiles bigger than this in our arsenal 60-some years later. But actually, yeah, we're pushing 67 years later here, 1959. This Vanguard was a program to launch small payloads, and here it is, into Earth orbit, very much testing all elements of space flight in 1959. This one was orbited 360 miles high. Low. It was over 1,800 miles high, and then it dipped down to 300 miles. And it operated for 18 days. The satellite wobbled, degraded some of the data that was coming about the magnetosphere. They were flying magnetometers, basically a giant magnet with sensors on it to see what direction magnetic field was coming and so forth. So very primitive and very first step into space, Vanguard 2 on this date, February 17th, 1959. Well, one of the great unsung programs of the moon race is the Ranger program. And this is the launch of Ranger 8 on February 17th, 1965. This was launched by an Atlas rocket, all right, with a Agena B second stage. These are the famous Atlas rockets that were launched from our wonderful gallery. Our Cape Canaveral gallery depicts a lot of the instrumentation and the processing equipment that was used back in the day, including the what we have back there, the control brains, Marty. I'm blacking out, that we call the brains back there. The sequencer. Yeah, so I'm trying to get is the word sequencer out of my name there. What a great room we have back there. Launched over 400 Atlas rockets. The second stage of Gina is actually familiar to people in the Gemini program. That's what they docked with. Okay, Centaur was also the second stage on this rocket a lot. And at the top is this spacecraft. It's a kamikaze spacecraft called basically a platform for 4 different cameras with different lenses on them. One would be a wide angle, and then it'd have a telephoto, and it'd have a couple lenses in between there. Because as it reached the moon, it was going to open up the film channels. It was going to be broadcasting live TV back to Earth that was being captured on videotape, and kamikaze crash into the moon at the last very seconds, usually about is going so fast, about 30,000 miles an hour, that when it hit the moon, the last picture was made a couple hundred feet above the surface with the resolution of about 5 feet. Well, this was a problem that this didn't work. The first 6 launches crashed without getting any pictures at all. The first 2 Rangers missed the moon. Then they crashed. Then one worked perfectly, and the cameras didn't work. So you know what happens when you have a $1.3 billion program in 2021 dollars. Of course, back in 60 years ago, that was only like $180 million, but that equates to 1.3 billion today. So when you got a $1 billion program but things aren't working, you know what happens, Marty?
Yes.
NASA officials are talking to congressional investigation boards saying, what are you wasting our money for, okay? Half of us don't want to go to the moon anyway. We think it's a waste. And this was 1965. Finally, Ranger 7 worked a few months before this. Then Ranger 8 and 9 worked perfectly. In this one, kamikaze crashed into that area of the moon there that you can see just right at the center. And those of you that know our moon landing sites know that that is Tranquility, Mare Tranquility. And yes, this was the scout, if you will, that took pictures to survey the Apollo 11 landing site. So images from this mission in 1965 on this date, February 17th, helped choose the Apollo 11 landing site 4.5 years later. And you see those little hashtag marks on there. Those are called RISO marks, and they help determine distances and so forth, and with trigonometry and other types of calculations there. But this is the last transmission you see above my head. It crashed right in the middle of this transmission. In the smallest little craters you see there, 5 miles across. This whole area is maybe the size of a basketball court. All right, if you can equate to that. So it was only 525 feet above the surface, just a tenth of a second before it hit the moon at 6,000 miles an hour, okay? And so this was exceptional accuracy considering the 230,000 mile trip. Yes, Marty?
C. Gubin's asking, do we know what was the distance between the Ranger's impact site and the Apollo 11 landing site?
Do we know the difference in them?
Distance?
Do we know the difference between the 2 sites? Between the Ranger and Apollo 11?
The difference was minimal, I suppose. We did not bring back any soil from there. I'm not sure what Rock is asking there. That's Rock Keats. He's asking the distances
No,
No,
between
Mark,
them?
he's asking the difference between the Ranger landing or crash site.
Oh,
and the
okay.
Apollo
It was
11.
within 200 miles. Actually, it was within 100 miles. All right, the moon's 2,000 miles across. So, yes, it was very close. Actually, good question. I believe I thought it was about 30 miles. Now that I'm looking back, remembering what we did there. But excellent question, because here's the crater above my head. That is the crater that was created by Ranger as it impacted. And Marty, you see something on the far right over there that was ejected out, a piece that broke off and landed over in the far left there at 9 o'clock. Yeah, right there. Yeah, more to the left there. You see something hit and rolled to a stop there. That could be part of the big camera pack there. But the rest of it created this fresh crater that we've seen by Luna Reconnaissance Orbiter that's been orbiting the moon for 12 years. And it has seen all these sites. And Rock Keats in Europe there is asking that question. I can look that up by the lunar orbit photography, and I'll do that, my friend. Well, maybe you worked on way back in the 50s. You'd be an old timer for sure. Maybe you worked on this Ranger program. Maybe you worked on the Apollo program like Marty Winkle did here. If you did, we want your story on the U.S. Spacewalker Hall of Fame. Okay. Again, go to the American Space Museum. This is our website. At the top, it says the Spacewalker Hall of Honor. You type your name in there right over my shoulder. You might be in there as a primitive database that we downloaded in there. So if your name appears in there, or if it doesn't, we want you to enter it and then tell a little bit of biography, thumbnail history about yourself. Here's Mr. Jim Tully, who was a space worker in the shuttle era for Lockheed and Lockheed Martin Air and United Space Alliance. He is helping put this program together. And below there is a couple paragraphs, even with photographs if you want, of you as a space worker. This is what the American Space Museum is about, is honoring space workers and their achievements. We have things in our cases of galleries that are the manuals, the items, the even the memo paper that space workers communicated back and forth with. And we can't thank Jim Tully enough for the time he spent to resurrect this program, and we want to promote it more. So if you know a space worker, go to Space Worker Hall of Honor and put your bio up there. Well, let's segue into on February 18th, okay, 1930. On February 17th, 1930, there was only our solar system went out to the planet Neptune, okay? And then February 18th, 1830, a man named Clyde Tombaugh at an observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona, financed by quite a eccentric millionaire, Percival Lowell, eccentric in a science way. He discovered on plates that he took 6 months apart, something moved on one of them photographic glass plates that he took 6 months earlier in the constellation Gemini, and he discovered Planet X. This is my weekly reader book, Marty, that I bought for, 40 cents? Not a lot of money back there, mowing a yard or something for that, to buy that weekly reader book on the search for Planet X about Clyde Tombaugh, who is really, of course, has passed away, but is really a phenomenal guy. Clyde lived to be age 90, and he died in 1997. I'll show you a picture of him in just a minute. But at the time, Neptune was the furthest that the solar system went, 1 billion miles away from the sun. That's not the one I wanted there. Where's the search for Planet X there? Discovery of Planet X, Pluto. Clyde Tombaugh was employed by Percival Lowell in the New York Times, all right, here announced on Friday, March 14th, 1930, 9th planet greater than Earth found. Okay, new discovery bears out calculation of Lowell is most important since a discovery since that of Pluto. Savants think it may be bigger than Jupiter. All right. So what's going on here is we didn't know how big Pluto was when we saw this speck of light that was right here on its discovery plates. The arrow shows you a faint star that has moved against the background. Lowell checked that it was not Percival Lowell, but Clyde Tombaugh checked that it wasn't an asteroid, wasn't a comet. It was in a strange orbit, like a comet, though. And yet Percival Lowell had calculated there'd be another planet beyond Neptune because of the pull on Neptune's gravity. Something was pulling it that wasn't quite right. It wasn't predicted where it should be. And though Pluto was found out not to be big enough to cause that pull, it still was the 9th planet from 1930 until about 1915 when it was demoted to the class of dwarf planet. One reason, it's barely bigger than the moon. Two, it's not in a plane like a pie plate of the Earth orbit of the other planets going around the sun. It goes way above and way below that pie plate kind of plane that all the other planets are rotating in. But nonetheless, in my heart, it is a planet. Marty, you have a comment?
Yeah, from Z Gubin. A small amount of Tombour's cremated ashes are stored on the New Horizons spacecraft in a small aluminum capsule.
That's
you
right.
Want to know that.
That's right. That is good to know that. Thank you, Rock Keats, for telling us that. That's the young space engineer in Europe, and he's on Twitch. So he's wearing out the Twitch there. We love it. Yes, Clyde Tombaugh is not only past Pluto, but he passed another, not dwarf planet, but another Kuiper Belt planet, Kuiper Belt object. Because when we go beyond Pluto, Pluto's over 4 billion miles away. I was incorrect when I said Neptune was 1 billion. It was 2 billion miles away. So the big newspaper headlines really were the solar system was doubled by the discovery of something in it. And in 1930, we were just beginning to realize that the Milky Way galaxy was not the entire universe, because Edwin Hubble, 10 years before, had determined with the Palomar Great 200-ish telescope that we were just an island of stars like other faint fuzzies out there once they started photographing them. Well, there is Clyde Tombaugh. I want to just back up to this one newspaper clipping that I have. Mars inhabited, says Professor Lowell. This is in 1907, all right? So when Percival Lowell was quite a famous science popularizer, he had some scientific knowledge, but not like Neil deGrasse Tyson or Bill Nye the Science Guy, who in today's 21st century promotes science. But he was along those lines. He was like Stephen Hawking, and wrote 4 books about what he thought was Mars, an inhabited planet. Here's the New York Times giving him credence in 1907 after his 4 books had been written and become bestsellers. 9th planet found. We didn't know how big it was, but it was conjectured. There is Clyde Tombaugh with the telescope that in 1931. And there he is at New Mexico State University in his office. All right. And there he was. He grew up in Kansas, I believe. And there's a telescope that he made. Because I was an amateur astronomer like a young boy, since a young boy. And as a young boy, I was fascinated with Clyde Tombaugh's story. But this is the last time that anybody discovered anything really with their eyesight. There is Pluto. As New Horizons flew by it with the ashes of Clyde Tombaugh, part of this is a lake, a frozen lake of nitrogen called that's shaped like a heart. And it is strangely, they had to name this most prominent feature after Clyde Tombaugh, and it's called the Clyde Tombaugh region. Also, the Sputnik planet, Planitia, is that's actually the Sputnik Planitia there, the heart-shaped object, though Tombaugh region outlines it there. All right. Because Pluto's almost 40 times further from the sun than we are, it takes 248 years to complete one orbit, so it's only been discovered since 1930, so it's not even halfway around the sun since we discovered it. But each time Pluto goes around the sun, a bit of nitrogen accumulates in this heart, they believe. And once enough ice has piled up, hundreds of meters thick, it actually creates lopsidedness on this small planet the size of our moon, about 2,000 miles, and can cause it to wobble around. So there's a lot of science to be learned about Pluto. It is one of the most fascinating objects in our solar system, cracked, frozen, tipped over, and very active. These dark areas are like mountains of nitrogen that are floating on this slush around it. So quite a dynamic world, and we hope to one day send more spacecraft to Pluto to check it out. You can't see it very well with the Hubble telescope or even the Webb telescope. So these are the last images, close-up of Pluto that we're going to see in maybe more than one lifetime. Well, we're going to sit. There is Clyde Tombaugh. I told you I got to meet him. That's me there, rocking a dark hair, mustache, and tie. Clyde had osteoporosis as an older man there, and he wasn't very tall anyway. But this was at an event of our Bristol Astronomy Club, and this gentleman above my head was the astronomer there who knew Clyde Tombaugh very well, and a mentor of mine there. So Dr. Burke there. So that picture is from 1900s, back in the 20th century. That's so here is Percival Lowell we were talking about. Quite a character. This guy was a blue blood Boston aristocrat that just liked astronomy like a hobby. His dad was wealthy. I forget what the Percival Lowell, the Lowell business interests were. But his sister was the great poet Amy Lowell. So there were some interesting cocktail parties and dinners, I'm sure, around the Lowell mansion. He always was dressed up like this, but he loved astronomy. He bought one of the best telescopes in the world, a Clark 24-inch, built an observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona, way north of Phoenix, and actually closer to New Mexico, the Arizona crater up there, and started seeing Mars in a way that nobody ever saw it. And he drew his own maps and charts and said that he could see canals, and that Mars was a dying world that was signaling the Earth. And he wrote 4 books about that. And here's about $1,000 worth of rare books. Okay, Mars in like 1897, Mars and its canals. A couple years later, Mars is the Abode of Life was a bestseller in like 1903. And then The Evolution of Worlds was his look and prediction that the solar system was teeming with life. And then there's Lowell's canals that he drew. Basically, they're optical illusions. They don't really even relate to any straight lines seen by the spacecraft that have orbited Mars in our late 20th and 21st centuries here. And where's that one? Mars. Oh, we don't have that picture of Mars there. Oh, okay. Yeah, there we do. Okay. I wanted to mention that the books of Mars, when I was a teenager, I had to write to the Columbus, Ohio University Library of Ohio State to hold that one Mars book in my hand so I could read it and do my science project on Mars, of course, and the canals. The canal myth was live until 1965, all right? We were for over half a century, we thought that Mars did support living creatures. In fact, a lot of astronomers thought that we would find life on the moon. Maybe even in the sun would be areas that life could exist. The great William Herschel in the 1800s thought that Venus would have life on it. Scientists in the 1800s, 1700s really thought that they didn't give it a second thought that life would be everywhere, all right? And then in the 19th and 20th centuries, we're kind of like skeptical that life is anywhere. And so it's a real switch in thinking that from, that, hey, life's got to be everywhere. We can't wait to meet our neighbors on Venus and Mars, to like, oh boy, we don't even know if we can find microbes on any of the watery worlds that are in our solar system. Duh, we're going to find life everywhere there is water, frozen, liquid, wherever, just like here on Earth. And I even think we probably know that there is bacteria on Mars, and they don't know how to tell it to this entire social media world without everybody flipping out. So, but I think our solar system and universe is teeming with life. In the case of our solar system, no, we got some roly-polies, maybe blind crickets, that sort of thing in the caves of Mars. And maybe we have aquatic creatures underneath the moons of Jupiter that we know are covered with rocky ice, but underneath are oceans. So Lowell was on to it. And here is, again, not Southwest Arizona, but that's Mars. All right. In the distance is the central peak of the crater that Perseverance landed in. And here is Lowell's Mars, of hoping that those were going to be big canals bringing water to the dying civilizations in the oases there where canals crossed and so forth. But here's the same region of Mars that Lowell drew in 1902, photographed by the Hubble telescope, all right, in 2001 when Mars was closest to the Earth there. So I don't see any hints of any of the lines that Lowell's seen there. And the resolution of the Hubble telescope there is a lot better than the scope Lowell had on Earth. Well, Doug Forrest, we hope you're enjoying our program today. Dave Stange is, Carlton Bailey, Cynthia Ross, Gary Gerald, Hazel Banks. Thank you for watching, Hayes. Steve Hammer, Tom Usiak, talk to your brother. He's headed to Michigan. Boy, we feel sorry for him there. Not really, Dave Stange. Michigan's a great place. William Whiting's made it back up there, I think. And Howard Pepper's watching. Thank you, Howard, for staying curious. Well, we're going to end today's show with talking about this SUV-sized, incredible scientific rover called, what is it called?
Perseverance.
Yeah, Perseverance. Because I was thinking of Curiosity that is on the, also its twin, about 1,000 miles from it, and it's been on the surface of Mars for over 5 years. But these spacecraft take a selfie of themselves by holding out their robotic arm and shooting pictures of the rest of it, okay? And then I think they superimpose the picture of the camera over that. But, you know, if we would have seen this picture when the Viking landers landed in 1976 on Mars, they were stationary and landed in real flat areas. If we could have landed them and seen these striated layers of sediment on that outcrop in the back there, folks, that only happens where there is water. And we don't know if we're going to dig into that sediment and find seashells or find roly-poly shells or an imprint of a flying bird or something in there. It could happen. Now, the Mars, because its atmosphere is so thin, everything on the surface for millions and millions of years has just been fried beyond belief like a microwave oven. And then the winds, there's no rain on Mars. There's some precipitation a little bit that usually doesn't hit the ground, and storm or snowflakes. But this had running water channels going through it. Where this spacecraft is sitting right now, it landed in near this area 2 years ago tomorrow, on February 18, 2021. And if it was sitting in this area 3 billion years ago, it'd be underwater. And that's something to think about. Here is Perseverance at Jet Propulsion Lab. I love looking at the pictures of it where the scientists, how proud are these people in this picture looking at their spacecraft, getting a little dusty over time because Mars is a dusty, red covered with a faint rusty dust. Okay, but this one and Curiosity are powered by nuclear power generators that are they're gonna outlast the wheels and instruments on these. So we got 2 active rovers on Mars. All right. But just how cool is that to look how pristine it was at Jet Propulsion Lab back in the day. And of course, Perseverance has Ingenuity, the $80 million helicopter that is about the size of holding in my hand like this, okay? And it was designed for $83 million to make 5 experimental flights, all right, maybe 10 if the other ones went well. And guess what? In 2 years, it has made 43 flights. It is recharged by solar panels at the top there and has these long-winded rotors that whip around and lift it up. And it's got a camera on it. And this has now turned into a scout for the rover to find places where they want it to investigate because it's just got amazing resolution. And it's just been a phenomenal success, Ingenuity, the rover on Mars. So now it's a game changer that when humans go to Mars, they're definitely going to want to have drones like this to help them see things over the horizon, over the mountain, whatever. oncoming dust storms, that sort of thing. So, and then eventually we'll have a human rated helicopter on Mars. So, what would Wilbur and Orville Wright think? All right, this is legendary technology, and like I said, it's supposed to do 5 flights. It has done 43 successful flights. This little helicopter that could. Well, there's the Rocky. Look at that. That looks like Southwest United States. Look at these layers, Marty. The scientists are going crazy because there's 30 different layers there of layering sediment, meaning different situations on Mars were happening. We can't wait to get boots on the ground there to figure out what. As you look at this vista here, that looks like a 20 Mule Train TV show there, Rawhide, where the wagon train's going to come around the corner there any minute there with Clint Eastwood leading a band of cowboys there. So, but it's gorgeous, isn't it? And this is the 4th rock from the sun. And go out tonight, look directly overhead. There's going to be 2 red stars. The one furthest west is Mars. We've shown you pictures of that on Stay Curious. So go out and look and imagine the sun setting on Mars. Okay, does look like this. That's our sun at about 150 million miles away is when Mars is usually 100 to 150 million miles away. It got as close as 40 million miles away 2 months ago. Now it's drifting away from Earth there. So appropriate to end our program with a sunset on the planet Mars as we think about Perseverance, a $1 billion rover that's matched the one Curiosity that we put on 5 years ago, doing great science and showing us vistas and that look very much like Earth and tantalize us that someday the big dreamers are dreaming. Human eyes will see this sunset for their own. So, well, thank you, Marty. Do we have any other comments on our UCAC family microphone there?
Well, yeah. Steve Gubin said, just this week, Perseverance deposited the first 10 sample tubes to be collected by the Mars Samples Return mission.
Yes, right. He's mentioning there that it has dropped test tubes full of interesting rocks on the surface of Mars to be picked up by another rover someday. Fingers crossed they don't have the money appropriated for that rover yet. It's still on the drawing board. So those you might have humans picking them up, Marty, for all I know, back in the day. It's a great idea, but why didn't they send a little rocket with them to send them back now? Why are we going to wait? It'll be at least 6 to 8 years that we would get those back now, because only every 2 years can we send a mission to Mars. But thanks for mentioning that. And thank you all for being here on Stay Curious this week. Marty and I are going to enjoy, we've asked astronaut Charlie Walker out to dinner Sunday, and after his talks at the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex, and he's agreed to go out to dinner with us, and we're going to then bring him back here to the Stay Curious studios and record what I'm sure will be an entertaining Stay Curious episode with astronaut Charlie Walker. So you can look forward to watching that next week sometime. And we are so grateful that you can support our museum any way you can. If you're looking for a tax deduction around the corner, we can take some money off your hands that way, or support our museum with our auction coming up tomorrow. Where's there we are. Our space charity auction. You can make bids now and watch it live starting at noon tomorrow. All right, go to our website and you can find the links to all that. So hope to see you at the Space Museum tomorrow, and hope that you'll spend some time maybe watching some of our vast library of Stay Curious programs. We are rocking about episode 755 today, and I'm so grateful to Marty Winkle for what he's done to keep us going. Connie, thank you for your help today setting things up. And until we do it again, I'm Marquette saying we can't wait to see you staying curious to bridge the space between us.